Hello, welcome to another episode of the Hockey Hub Podcast. So glad you could join us. Adam Pellerin with Judd Sirott joining you from North Carolina. As we tape this, the Bruins are gearing up for a matchup against the Carolina Hurricanes. Episode number 43 of the Hockey Hub. A Danton Heinen 43, who was traded a couple of times in his career. A Matt Barkowski 43. A Bob Beers 43 for a brief time in black and gold. Judd, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you back on the road, Adam.
It's great to be back on the road. I know I told Brick, I actually reintroduced myself to Brick on the last episode of Hockey Hub and asked him for directions at TD Garden. I made it there because I was ringside for the game against the Predators, so that's the good news. And I also remembered how to travel. So I packed my suitcase and I'm with you. So it's good to be back with you and good to be talking Bruins hockey. And I'll tell you, man, we got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, I should tell you that Andrew Ference, former Bruins defenseman, Stanley Cup champion, will be joining us later on to talk about his experience, as a player, the NHL Trade Deadline. He played 16 years in the league. He's got a lot of experience, saying goodbye to teammates, saying hello to new ones. And so we will hear from him on that. And also we got the animated STEMcast coming up next week. We'll dive into that as well. But Judd, first, the big news this week for the Bruins, outside of Brad Marchand's injury status, which is week to week with an upper body injury, is that Trent Frederic was traded to the Edmonton Oilers along with Max Jones, the Red Sox. Geez, it's spring training. I've done that a couple of times on this podcast. It's spring training. It's kind of in my head a little bit. I'll be honest with you. But the Bruins receiving a couple of draft picks and a prospect in return, multi-team deal. But let's just talk about Trent Frederic, and obviously a former first-round pick of the Bruins. As you take a look at the details of the deal, just your thoughts and your reaction to the trade, Judd.
Well, I mean, this is sort of the nature of the business. I think Charlie Coyle had mentioned after yesterday's game against the Nashville Predators, it stinks. Listen, Trent Frederic was really well liked in that Bruins dressing room. And listen, he was a good Bruin across the 7 years that he was in the Bruins organization. Last year, he obviously had a career season and 18 goals and 40 points. Wasn't able to get back to those numbers here this season, but it's just sort of the nature of the business, especially at this time of year with the NHL Trade Deadline coming on Friday. And we're going to know what this roster is going to look like sort of late in the afternoon. And obviously there's a lot of movement that we can talk about, but when the general manager, Don Sweeney, had mentioned that it didn't sound like he was going to move forward with any of his unrestricted free agents, that was a guy like Trent Frederic. Listen, he's going to command some money. I don't envision that he signs a long-term deal in Edmonton. Obviously, anything is possible. But for the Edmonton Oilers, they pick up a versatile third-line player. He can play all three positions. He's definitely tough. He's got some really good hands. He should probably shoot the puck a little bit more. But I think that we all have to sort of prepare ourselves that the roster that the Bruins put forth on the ice against the Nashville Predators is probably going to look different than the one that we're going to see on Saturday afternoon in Tampa.
Yeah, Trent Frederic could be the first domino to fall for the Bruins as we get closer to the trade deadline on Friday. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday. Episode drops on Thursday. A lot can happen even between now and then. So we'll have to see how things play out. But in terms of, the current roster, and you look at some of the candidates, right? Brick and I had talked about it the other day, and you obviously look first at the unrestricted free agents and the restricted free agents. And, of course, Trent Frederic falls into that category. He was dealt. You have the captain, Brad Marchand. Again, with the injury situation, you don't know if that changes things or if he was even considered by the Bruins to be dealt at all. We really don't know. We're just sort of speculating.
Well, I think, Adam, since you bring up Brad Marchand, I think
sure.
One
Go ahead.
of the important parts of the conversation that Don Sweeney had talked about a couple of Sundays ago was the one unrestricted free agent that he thought he would move forward with. And again, Marchand's on record saying he wanted to spend his entire career as a Bruin. And Don Sweeney had mentioned that was my ultimate goal, to make him a Bruin throughout his career. Obviously, it's still not done. Could it change, between now and the time that this podcast drops? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about it. Um, it's a function of, all right, what are the terms? What are the dollars? He still has to be able to put together a roster. But I think that there's a will on both sides to try and get something done. But to get back to a guy like Trent Frederic and some of the other assets that we're going to talk about, and that's essentially what they are. If you're a guy in Don Sweeney, you need, as Cam Neely had talked about, you need the ability to retool. And what what the Bruins pick up from the Edmonton Oilers in the deal that sent Trent Frederic and Max Jones to the Edmonton Oilers, they pick up a second round pick, they pick up a fourth round pick, and they pick up a young prospect who will get moved. He's a young defenseman that he's going to be in the National Hockey League, but that's what they are. The Bruins have to accrue these assets, whether they use them as picks or in other trades. That's what they need to do to try and fortify this roster, both at the National Hockey League level, in Providence, and within the system.
Yeah, within the organization, because of course the Bruins have been contenders for the past 8 seasons as they've made the postseason. And at the trade deadline, you heard Don Sweeney talking about and Cam Neely talking about the two paths. Don Sweeney most recently saying that they're going to take a cautious approach relative to their philosophy at past trade deadlines, where they sort of had more of an all-in approach to try and contend and make a deep run in the postseason. This is much different than what we have seen in recent history with the Bruins. And one of the players that I was going to mention after Brad Marchand was Morgan Geekie, who is having a career season, scored his 20th goal of his career against the Nashville Predators, the first 20-goal season of his career, a player who got off to a slow start. And after the coaching change, we saw his plays sort of pick up. And since the month of January, he's second only to David Pastrnak in goals scored. Pasta has scored 19 goals since January 1st. Morgan Geekie has scored 12 goals. And, he has had a career, and you sort of wonder, if he's going to be a Bruin for long, Judd.
Well, that's a really good question. I think the one difference with a guy like Morgan Geekie versus a guy like Trent Frederic is he is a restricted free agent. That means the Bruins at least have more opportunities to keep him within the fold. That said, he's a 20-goal scorer, and his contract is up, and there might be another team, because he's only 26 years old, that he might have some interest in. But a credit to Morgan Geekie, what he's been able to do here in the last 2 years. Last year, he had a career-high 17 goals. This year, he's been able to exceed that. He's got 20. And I'm sure a lot of people around the NHL and maybe in Boston think, oh, well, he's playing with David Pastrnak. Anybody could do that. And that's simply not the case, because you have to be able to think and play alongside a guy like David Pastrnak. And he's been able to cash in on those opportunities.
He certainly has, and has certainly found a home here in Boston, at least for the time being. So we'll see how it plays out. 17 and 22 last year, 20 and 13 so far this year. Stream the entire Sox season with a NESN 360 annual plan, available at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month, paid annually, and for a limited time. Get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit NESN360.com to sign up today. Adam Pellerin, Judd Sirott here with you, episode number 43 of the Hockey Hub podcast, as we take a look at the Bruins roster and who may be on the move. Obviously, Trent Frederic already traded, so we'll see how the rest of the roster shakes out leading up to the March 7th trade deadline. And one of the things that will be a storyline moving forward, because of the injuries and because of the possible trades that could be on the horizon, is opportunity. And that's opportunity for some younger players. We saw Georgi Merkulov was called up. Had an opportunity, was sent down to Providence, and now we're seeing some more players get called up from Providence. The most recent transaction happening on Wednesday, with the Bruins called up 4 players, some guys that have been up here before, Riley Tufte and Patrick Brown, Ian Mitchell and Vinny Lettieri. And Joe Sacco had said on Wednesday after practice that all four will be in the lineup, expected to be in the lineup against the Carolina Hurricanes. So we're going to get a look at those guys and possibly more moving forward. And one name that Bruins fans sort of had on their radar is Fabian Lysell. Will he get another opportunity? He only played just the one game when he was called up. So it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward.
Well, let's start with Georgi Merkulov. 1 assist in 6 games, and I think maybe early on in his first call up, he didn't necessarily get the type of offensive opportunities or get the offensive situations that maybe would give you an ability to really evaluate his play. Well, this time he did. He was playing in the top 6. He was getting some second power play minutes, and he really wasn't able to really show much and create plays. I think back to the game on Sunday. I understand that's a difficult situation. You're playing a back-to-back game. The Bruins had played, traveled, and won in Pittsburgh, and now you're facing off against the Minnesota Wild. And listen, Georgie was not alone. I think the interim head coach Joe Sacco said in Minnesota, and the Bruins were shut out 1-0 by Philip Gustafson. The team didn't create a whole lot, and he was in that group. But you're there to try and make an impression. And I think for the Bruins, one of the things that was clear, whether you talk to the players, you talk to the coaching staff, you can see that the ability is there. But much like we talk about that in the National Hockey League, it's the winning business. Well, you're also in the production business. And for a guy like Georgi Merkulov or any player who has designs on playing in the top 6, you got to be able to produce. And he wasn't able to do that during a 6-game stint. As far as Fabian Lysell, I think the one thing that sticks out for me when Don Sweeney was asked about him a couple of weeks ago is that all those players in Providence, if their play merits it, then they're going to be here. And at least to this point, maybe it hasn't merited that. But again, we still have, the Bruins have 19 games remaining in the regular season as we talk now. So I would expect that we're going to see another look at Fabian Lysell. He had that really short stint. He had the 1-game stint. But I would imagine, unless for some reason he gets dealt or he gets injured or maybe there's some other circumstance, that will probably get an opportunity, because that's the other thing that you get a chance to do. And listen, the Bruins, as we talk now, they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot. Yes, as we talk now, they have to pass over 4 teams to get it, but there's still an opportunity to see what certain guys you might be interested in your system, what they play like in NHL circumstances. Lysell's one of those guys.
I'll tell you, that would add an element of excitement, right? If the Bruins make some more deals at the trade deadline, they bring up some of the young players, and the young players give them a bump, right? And we had seen that, and there's precedent with that, right? Because, and again, this is a conversation that, the Brick and I had in the last episode of the Hockey Hub. We talked about the example of Washington, the Capitals last year. They stand pat at the trade deadline. They had some young players pop, and look at where they are now. And so, the Bruins are hoping that some of their young guys pop, and we've seen that with Mason Lohrei. Now, granted, he spent the entire year with the Bruins, but he's getting more opportunity because of the injury situation. And you look at a guy like Matt Poitras, too. You'd like to see him sort of, get into a rhythm, get into a groove, because, it's something that Joe Sacco had talked about today is that, he's a guy that's still learning. He talked about, situationally, a guy that's still learning. The players that, are in Providence, yeah, but also you have some young players on this Bruins roster that you'd like to see make some strides as well.
Adam, you bring up a couple of great points there. And since you're talking about the Washington Capitals and some of the young guys that have come through for them this year, I remember Alexei Protas last year, and he looked like a borderline National Hockey League player. Well, this year he's an impact player for the Washington Capitals. And even though Georgi Merkulov was sent back to the Providence Bruins, that doesn't mean that eventually he finds his way and sticks in the National Hockey League. I think we always think of development as this kind of straight line steadily going up, and that's typically not the way it works with players. That there's some bumps in the road, and obviously there's some peaks. And if that player ultimately makes it to the National Hockey League, then yes, you start to see the development on much more of a gradual path going up. But Georgi Merkulov could make it into the National Hockey League. A guy like Matt Poitras, who we saw last year, and it was a different circumstance because you could not send him to the American Hockey League because of his age. This year, he did spend some time in the American Hockey League, and he may spend some more time in the American Hockey League, and that's okay. He's only 20 years old. He's going through, he hasn't even played his first full season in the National Hockey League. Last year was cut short because of the shoulder injury. This year, he had some time up. He was down, but again, this is a 20-year-old kid that is still getting stronger, still getting acclimated to the league. And then hopefully he's able to catch on, grab some traction, and becomes a legitimate impact player for the Bruins.
Yep, getting plenty of opportunity at the NHL level. Matt Poitras is for sure. You're watching the Hockey Hub, and if you like what you hear, then make sure to like and subscribe to the show. Hockey Hub can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and wherever else podcasts are found. Adam Pellerin, Judd Sirott here with you, episode number 43 of the Hockey Hub podcast. Well, Andrew Ference certainly knows what it's like to play in the National Hockey League when it comes to the trade deadline. He's been through many over the course of his career. He's been traded. He's experienced, teammates that have been traded, whether it's to rebuild or make a run. And so he was kind enough to join us on the Hockey Hub podcast to talk about that and more.
And joining us now, former Bruins defenseman Andrew Ference on the Hockey Hub podcast. For the first time, we're making history, man. First appearance on the Hockey Hub. This is a big day. What's up?
What took so long? You finally got down the list or what?
Yeah, I was looking at the list and I said, we finally get to Ference. So there you go. That's why you're on. But hey, thanks for joining us. And you got the Boston mug too, I see. All right, yeah.
I'm never too far from home.
There you go.
On the other side of the continent.
Does Boston feel like home to you? I know, obviously, you spent time here as a player. You lived here. I know you're not here anymore. When you come back, does it still feel like home?
It really does. Yeah, no, 100%. Every time I fly in, and I've lived, in a number of places, but it's different. It's definitely a different feeling. I land in Logan, and it feels like I could hop right back into the city in a heartbeat. Obviously, I didn't. At the end of my career, different opportunities came up, and my kids were in school out here, so I didn't end up moving back. But I find little ways to come back. My daughter goes to school there, so I visit her as much as possible. Work brings me into town quite a bit, but I've tried to place it. I lived in the North End. I think it's the best community, neighborhood that I've ever lived in. I got some incredible friends outside of hockey as well. So, reconnecting with them when I'm back in the city, and yeah, man, there's just something about it. It's a special place, for me.
So many great memories for you here, obviously. And I'm sure that it was great to come back last season during the Centennial celebration, reconnect with some of your former teammates, maybe some guys that you hadn't seen in a while, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, there's a few guys now, obviously, that, post-career, you have different opportunities in hockey. So, I see Sean Thornton every once in a while at NHL events, and Gregory Campbell, they're both down in Florida. I see Bergie, when I'm in town, Z once in a while. We still have a group chat, once in a while somebody will fire off on it, but it's, kind of sporadic. And then, our 10-year anniversary was right during kind of COVID lockdown. So we never really did anything, for the proper 10-year anniversary. So that was really the first time that we'd gotten back together. And this past year too, we had a Warrior for Life game over at Warrior Hockey Rink, but it was NHL Foundation and the Bruins Foundation, and we played against a bunch of Navy SEALs, and a big portion of the 2011 team was there playing, and that was pretty special too. as nice it is to go out and give the Garden a wave and do the thing, it was actually pretty fun to just be in the locker room and hang out with the guys for that fundraiser game as well.
Yeah, that game back in December raised a lot of money, and obviously such an important program, something you've been a part of. And you mentioned all the players that were on the ice with you, all retired. But Brad Marchand was there too, right? Like, he showed up after, because the Bruins had a matinee game against the Flyers. I think you guys were there. Is that correct? Were at the game and then went over to Warrior afterwards?
Yeah, they had a big comeback win, and then
Yeah.
Marchand. But that's the thing, is like, the opportunities to do that are few and far between, right? So it was good to see him, and he's still one of the guys too, right? I mean, it's nice to for him to be able to see some of the old faces and have a quick catch up. And I know he was practicing his future career in coaching, which would be a treat to see him behind the bench. I'd love a press conference with him as a coach. That'd be great.
Well, how about him as a captain, right? I mean, you played with a younger Brad Marchand, who was affectionately known as a rat, right? And somebody who, get under the skin of opponents. Great skill too, obviously, and his performance in that 2011 Cup run was outstanding. But, and I know you've been asked this question before. A lot of your former teammates have. But can you believe that, that if you told the 2011 Andrew Ference in 2011, if he told you that he was going to be a captain someday, would you believe it?
I could probably wrap my head around it. And now, well, maybe I'm saying that with hindsight. I think that you see different leaders throughout a career, through life, really. Not just in hockey, but I've really kind of landed on the idea that a good leader is just authentic. First, they are who they are. They're not trying to be something different. They're not trying to be a leader. I think that they come, as who they are, and they do the right thing, for the group. And I think, when you think about him, he's very true to who he is. He's always been that way. He's authentic. I don't think he ever, shies away from owning up to, things that he would, rather, like to maybe take back, but also things that he wouldn't take back. He's a competitor. And I think, listening to him last year, I think it was last year during the playoffs, him kind of talking about the truth of hockey is like, look, I'm out there trying to get any edge I can. And sometimes it's, violence included, or, tactically trying to get under people's skin. Like, that's part of the game. I'm trying to win. And that's not always fair. And that's not always nice to other people. But, I like his honesty. And he was like that in the room. He was honest, and he was who he was, and I think that those are the best leaders for sure.
And when you were playing in Boston, Zdeno Chara was the captain. You became a captain towards the end of the career with the Edmonton Oilers. How much did you learn from Big Z?
Well, I wish I could have learned more. I mean, I have. It's hard, being a leader. I think that by committee in Boston was really good. We had a good group of people to balance each other out. Z was an incredible leader with the way that he distributed ownership of what we were trying to do. I think that was a quality that he had in spades. He was very good at. He was a good manager, I guess would be the best way to put it. Now that I'm in the corporate world, I can kind of see what he was. And he really did. He gave certain parts of his captaincy, I guess, or his leadership responsibilities onto other people, and that was a really I don't know, I think a very valuable thing for us, and it helped him, right? Not to shoulder the whole load himself, but we had such a good group. I was a captain, obviously, in Edmonton, my hometown, and came straight from an organization like the Bruins, so just tried to copy and paste what I had seen there and what I had learned there onto a completely different environment, which in hindsight was kind of dumb to think that would work. I think you have to know what you're working with, right? And I think that given a second chance for sure. I think I would do things a little bit differently, and I think probably learn that lesson a little bit better. From Z is really the importance of bringing other people into the process right away, and having them buy in and contribute in a more meaningful way.
and another captain, Patrice Bergeron. You had an opportunity to reconnect with him here on Nesson for Unobstructed Views and the all cast that we do here. And I know that you've made appearances on TV, but to actually be a part of like a show and a game broadcast, what was that like for you?
It was great. I think it's it's a unique way of watching the game. I've obviously seen, the football with the Manning brothers, and I've seen, some of the alt casts where it's just a little bit more of a casual, it's like you're eavesdropping on, a pretty interesting conversation. And I think it's a brilliant way of presenting a game, and it's like you're hanging out in the living room watching the game together with some pretty incredible people. Obviously, Tuukka and Bergie bring so much, from the perspective of how they see the game and how they come at the game of hockey, and to listen into how they are processing certain plays and the game itself. And then I think it's fun too. Obviously, they do it in a way with Razor there that I don't know. I think it appeals to a lot of people to just have a different way to watch a game. So it was fun. I loved it. I loved chiming in and giving my 2 cents every once in a while, and obviously catching up with those guys in a way like that.
And you're going to be with me on the call for an animated STEMcast matchup. The Bruins matchup against the Florida Panthers will be on Nesson Plus and Nesson 360 on Tuesday when the Bees host the Panthers. We got to do a rehearsal together. It was a pretty unique experience, and this is kind of cool, right? For those listening who may not be familiar, we've been promoting this during Bruins games. It's entitled Snow Day. It's part of the Hockeyverse. It's part of an initiative of the National Hockey League. They've done some animated matchups. Chicago did one. They have some Hockeyverse. 30-minute cut-down versions as well on the NHL Network, but we're getting to do the actual full matchup, and we're going to incorporate some, STEM, some science and math, as it relates to the game of hockey. And we had a rehearsal, and it was a lot of fun, man. What did you think of the experience? Because again, like, you were on the all cast, not a lot of experience for you on TV in terms of like an analyst role. You're kind of dipping your toe in this water. So what was the experience like, that rehearsal?
Well, I laugh with my kids because so my oldest daughter's 19, youngest is turning 16 here at OA. And I laugh with them because I'm always taught, just say yes and just like plant seeds everywhere and give yourself opportunity to do lots of things and, get involved in a lot of different things because it's, life is short, so why not? You gotta say yes to a lot of things. So I try to live by, how I preach. And so it's funny. I think it's one of those things where I jumped on an opportunity, obviously, when it came up because it just sounds so cool. But then it's also, I was telling my kids, I'm doing this animated game, I'm going to be doing color commentary, and they're just like, you've never done that. Like, what are you doing?
They're like, yeah, go ahead, take risks, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, like, are you qualified? And I was like, I don't know if I am. but so our rehearsal the other day, it was actually very helpful because I'm like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more prepared. I'm no brick, that's for sure. But I listened to some really good color commentaries, and what's that commercial? Like, I stayed at a Best Western Express or something. Like,
yeah, right. Yes, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, right?
Holiday Inn Express, yeah. I guess it didn't make that big of an impact on me. But it's one of those things. Like, let's have some fun, and I think that the way that I am a bit more qualified is that obviously I've been working at the league for 7 years now with the NHL, and my department, social impact, growth, we work on all these youth programs, right? So to back up a little bit of why we're doing this, we have a massive program at the NHL and with the union called the Industry Growth Fund. And so it funds a number of programs that help grow the game of hockey. One of those programs is going into schools and teaching science and teaching STEM lessons through hockey. Right, so it's called Future Goals. It's run with a company called EverFi, and they go in and use hockey as a way to teach physics and math and force and all these different science lessons, and use our sport. And so I think it's brilliant. It's been pretty widespread, and the Bruins are capitalizing on that program by kind of joining up with this game. Right, so the ability for us to call the game, have some fun with it, introduce, some of the science aspects of the game of hockey. And then the broadcast is one thing, but then after the game, the ability to cut the game up, package it up into these little science lessons, these tidbits. So I'm out here on Vancouver Island, like there could be junior high kids out here, in little old Duncan, British Columbia, learning about hockey, through the game that we're going to be broadcasting, right? And so to have a homework project where, you got to figure out, I don't know, something about, Pasternak and how hard he shot, and
right.
why the bounce, the angle of the pass off the boards and the strength of the shot. It's just, for me, like that would have been really cool to learn, like as a 13, 14-year-old kid, like learning the concept of science, through a sweet goal by David Pasternak and beautiful commentary by the one and all. I think it's a really neat project. The broadcast itself is pretty cool. All the data that we're collecting from the puck and player tracking that is throughout the NHL now. People see it in regular broadcasts, how fast people are skating, how far they've skated, how hard they're shooting. That's all just data, right? And so all that's coming through the servers. To turn that into an animated game, like that's brilliant. Like people are so smart. The ability to actually do that and put it into basically real time. It's fascinating to me. So I'm excited to just be part of it. To be part of such a cool technology. To do the game with you, obviously, is going to be a lot of fun. I know rehearsal wise. I'm just trying not to step on your toes as the rookie. I'll be there. I'll have my tidbits ready, my fun science facts ready to go, and just have fun with it. Like, at the end of the day, like it's hockey, like, and it's in cartoon form. So, like, if we're not having fun, like, what are we doing? So, I'm really looking forward to it.
No lie, Ference has a notebook of little one-liners, some research. Like you had your little like old school notebook that you brought to the rehearsal, and you're like, oh yeah, I jotted all these ideas down. And it's great, it's awesome. And so even after doing that, though, he came up with some more ideas. We both did, and it was great to do the rehearsal to sort of see, the animated environment and the world that we're going to be living in for the entirety of the game. And it was cool. And the other thing was that we get to wear these VR headsets. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I don't have a lot of experience wearing the VR headset. I've maybe done it once, but not to see my animated self, which I thought was pretty cool. I remember we had the meeting beforehand, and we were going over with the whole team at the NHL about what the the animated environment was going to look like, and that we were going to be literally in that animated environment. And my only request is that the hairline be generous, and they granted my request. I got a great hairline in this animated environment. I think you do have. I think we're close to the same height, but I think you got a couple of more inches. In the animated world, so maybe we can make some adjustment, make us more eye to eye. That's my only complaint so far.
Well, like an NHL player, you got to juice your stats a little bit.
Maybe you're on skates. Maybe you're on skates. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, get with the program. Every 5'10" person is actually 6 feet in the NHL, right? But it was cool. It's actually the first time that I've worn like a good headset. I've tried like crappy ones before, but like that thing was amazing. And to literally be in the world, and I don't know, like where do you even start creating something like that? The detail in like the Boston landscape and the landmarks and everything going on. Like it's fascinating to me. It's really cool. So yeah, I got so many more ideas after actually seeing the world that is going to exist for that game. And yeah, I can't believe it, man. Like the technology is so wild. It kind of shoots me into the future too, right? Like how are we going to be watching hockey in 5-10 years? Like, are we just going to have that set on and basically be front row? Like it was so cool to me that we could just kind of be moved around the world, like anywhere really, and be part of the game, even on the ice, right? Like the puck vision and seeing from that perspective. Like it's it's a pretty cool glimpse into the future of hockey.
Yeah, really cool, and looking forward to it. Again, on March 11th, we'll be calling that STEMcast, and talking to you about your career a little bit in the National Hockey League, and as a captain to close out your career with the Oilers. You've experienced playing in different cities, being traded from teams. as well. And we got the trade deadline coming up, in the National Hockey League. This episode drops on Thursday, and, the trade deadline on Friday. What is that like as a player, knowing that you could lose some teammates, gain some new teammates, and maybe even get traded yourself at the deadline? What's that like for a player?
It's weird. I never got used to it. That's for sure. Obviously, like when you feel, the ability, or I guess the chance that it might be you. It's I don't know. It's just kind of hanging over everybody's head. To be frank. I mean, it's obviously different when you're on a successful team versus a team that's not doing so hot, because on the Bruins, you're always kind of thinking like it's additive, but they're not going to make a huge disruption, because the team's playing well. So we're going to add, but we're probably not going to lose, major pieces of the team. But when you're on a team that's not doing so well, like everybody feels like they're on, they're on the block, and that you could be, packing up and moving to a new place. I've never been traded right on the deadline. My probably closest would be obviously when I went from Calgary to Boston. Getting traded just in general is weird. I was on a road trip. We played in Buffalo, and we were on our way to Detroit. So we had just finished playing in Buffalo. We're sitting in the parking lot with the bus running, like ready to go to the airport, and it was taking a long time. It wasn't moving, and so that was weird on itself because NHL buses are usually on time to the second. If you're late, grab a taxi. So we weren't moving for a good 5-10 minutes, and then the assistant coach came on the bus. I was sitting close to the back, with my buddies and teammates, and he walks back and stops in my seat and says, "Andy, we traded you to Boston, so you're staying here tonight." And that's it. That's it. That's how a trade works. And I'm not unique. Like there's guys that find out, from the TV, or there's guys, guys find out in different ways, right? But that's how I found out. Like, walks back, you're traded. So literally, all right, see you guys that I've gotten to know over the last few years and went to the finals with and made friends. That's your family, right? And so you grab your bag, go down, literally pop open the door on the bus, grab my gear, bus drives off. I stay at a hotel, fly to Boston the next morning. So that's how a trade works. It's wild, right? And then you call home, you're like, "Hey, FYI, I'm not coming home."
Yeah.
Let's start figuring this out, right? And so, yeah, that trade, my daughter was 1, so that's pretty easy. Whatever,
right.
People can, it's part of the deal, right? But when kids start getting into school age, and you got the family doctor, and you got the school, and it's just all these different kind of moving parts, right? So I think that's why you see the appeal of these no trade lists and no movement clauses. It's just peace of mind, man. Not especially when you have kids, and
yeah.
At school age, it becomes really tough, right? So yeah, from a personal point of view, it's more about the life stuff than the hockey. I mean, you can walk into a hockey locker room and kind of pick up,
right.
Somebody from junior hockey, somebody from playing each other, from training in the summer. It would be really weird to walk into any room and not know somebody. The hockey world's not that big. And so that part's the easy one. You have an immediate kind of family just like that. But yeah, it's just the severing of ties from, really emotionally investing yourself into whatever team you're with, and then just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and, going somewhere new. It's odd. But losing teammates, I guess from that point of view, if you have an ounce of empathy, you
right.
you feel for them because they're going to go through that. And then the other part, bringing somebody new into the room, that's the easy part. I mean, I think that's you have the trust of a GM every time. Obviously in Boston, we did it. We brought in some great people on the run. You're thinking of Chris Kelly, who's obviously still there, and Rich Peverly. I think they came in right at the deadline. Just incredible pickups. They're great people, and when you have a strong culture and a strong room, that's the easy part. Like I said, for guys to just pick up and jump on the moving train, I guess.
Yeah, and that's got to ease the blow a little bit, right? When you're going to organization with so much history and so much success and so much promise for a future and some foundational pieces as well. I mean, that's got to ease the blow of getting traded a little bit when you're in a situation. Again, you guys didn't win the cup until a few years later, but they were sort of building something, right? With bringing in Zdeno Chara, bringing in Claude Julien, bringing in all of these different elements to try to have that translate to success. That must have been, at least something to look forward to as well, right?
In hindsight, yeah. I mean, for sure. Like looking back on it now, you're like, oh, that made so much sense.
Right. I guess that's true, right?
I think at the time, I had the year previously went to the finals with Calgary, right? So we lost to Tampa, so we were building up something there. Getting traded to Boston, I think they had missed the playoffs for however many years. I think 7 out of the 8, and had half full buildings, maybe just more than half filled. And nobody wore Bruins stuff around Boston. You wouldn't see the hats or the jerseys if you went down through Faneuil Hall or something like that. Like you just didn't see it. And so it was different, for sure. And I think that coming in, you have, you get to know the new coach, you get to know Claude, have the meeting with Chiarelli, new GM. I actually knew Z from junior hockey. He played in Prince George when I was down in Portland. So we both played in the Western League and crossed paths in Edmonton, during summer training. So I knew Z previously, and obviously how solid he was. So you could see what they're trying to do, whether or not it's going to work. You don't know.
Yeah, it's different, right? Yeah.
So like I said, hindsight, that was brilliant. We nailed it. But at the time, there's a lot of nerves, right? There's pressure. You're in an original 6 that's not doing well, and it's a half-filled building. That's tough, man. The pressure's on. The other teams are winning. What if we don't succeed at what we all want to do, right? So there's a lot of pressure. I think we responded. We had the right group to deal with that pressure and to deal with that those goals that we set for ourselves. We knew we had to make Bruins fans proud of the product again, right? And I think our approach was probably the right one. Claude was great. Those early meetings about what we actually were trying to accomplish. Just get into the playoffs, no matter what. We just need to get into the playoffs. But before that, the goal was literally, can we make these fans proud, of being, Bees fans again? Let's play a style that even if we lose to, one of the top teams in the league, we're going to beat the crap out of them, and we're going to be so hard, and we're going to be blocking shots and hitting everything and fighting when we need to and standing up for each other. And even if we lose some of those games, at least people are going to walk out of here and be like, all right, I like these guys, because that wasn't happening previously, right?
No.
That's the source of, I think, every city has a certain identity and a certain style that they like, and it is different from city to city, So I think that in the Bruins case, you got to build a team that fits the city and fits the fan. It's no different. You think of Philly, right? There's an identity that goes with certain clubs and certain teams, and when there's a mismatch or a misalignment, it's just off.
Yeah, and there are players that just don't fit, right? Sometimes, in that certain situation, right? It's just not a right fit, and that can happen too. But for you guys, ended up fitting just fine and winning a cup in 2011. I know you've told this story before, but we got to revisit it in case, people aren't aware, right? So 2011, your game-tying goal, Game 4 against Canadians, the glove malfunction, right? Which wasn't a malfunction. And there's a cool story behind that where, I'll let you tell it. Where is the glove, and how did it come to be?
Build up, I guess. I never really knew much. I grew up in Canada, so not a whole lot of interaction with the U.S. military. So but coming to Boston, actually, we did some military games, and I can't even remember how some of our relationships started. It might have been through the Dropkick Murphys. So I love punk. I'm punk fan. Dropkicks were awesome. So going to concerts, and I think through them, some mutual friends I made some really good friends in Boston that still to this day I'm very close friends with. One was an Army Ranger, another is a cop in Cambridge now, but he was also in the military. But Nick, so who's a cop now in Cambridge, he was on duty, huge Bruins fan, but he was deployed out in Afghanistan during the Cup run. And so he was just dying. He's like, oh, the time change, right? To watch the games and stuff like that, and obviously, not being able to partake in all the parties and just the energy of what was going on in Boston during the run, right? So I think he was feeling very far from home at the time. But they actually even flew on the base. I think they're in Kandahar. I might be getting my facts wrong here. But they flew like a Bruins flag up on the base and stuff like that. And he saved a couple of the American flags that they flew, during our games, and gave them to me. So, anyways, he was just an awesome guy, and you can send care packages to people that are
overseas,
deployed.
Yeah, right.
And so I put together a care package for him with like a bunch of candy and like little things from home and stuff like that. And then right on the top of the care package of the box, I made sure to position it. So I put the glove that I gave the finger with in Montreal. So I positioned it right on top. So as soon as he'd open the box, it'd be my glove giving him the finger. So I put the fingers down and everything like that. And so I just died because I was just waiting because I know this package is probably going to take like a month to get there. And I was just like, oh man, it's going to be so funny when he opens up this box in the middle of Afghanistan. I'm giving him the finger from over here. So anyways, Nick's got the glove. He brought it back. I don't know where he put it. It's probably in the cop shop in Cambridge.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're also probably hoping that it doesn't lose the form, right? Because it's got to take so long to get there. You're hoping it stays molded into how you position it in the box, right?
I put stuff around it. I was very, very strategic. Like I said, I placed candy and all that kind of stuff around, make sure that it was locked in there. Awesome. And it gets stuck, as we know.
Yeah, right. That's what happens, of course. Right, yeah, it got stuck. It's unfortunate, that these things happen with equipment sometimes.
It was going to hold its position no matter what.
Right, exactly. As you sip sinisterly from your Boston mug. Oh man. Well, listen. I think that's a good point to wrap things up, and really appreciate you coming on Hockey Hub. It's awesome. I'm really looking forward to the STEMcast on March 11th, reuniting and calling that Panthers-Bruins matchup. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Well, it's always good to see you, bud. Look forward to it next week. Big debut, color commentator, and you're going to hold my hand all the time, right? In virtual reality mode, or like
That's right. We'll be able to hold our hands virtually, right? Which we did, kind of like ET style, like touching fingers. Which was anyway. Good to see you, man. We'll see you soon.
Ciao.
All right.
That was great having Andrew Ference on the Hockey Hub podcast, and looking forward to spending some time with him when we do the animated STEMcast of the game against the Panthers. But obviously meant a lot to the Bruins in their 2011 Stanley Cup run, and played 16 years in the National Hockey League, was a captain out in Edmonton. So a vast hockey resume.
Well, he's a player of the highest character, and he was such a vital piece for the Bruins in the back end, certainly when they won the Stanley Cup, but also what he meant to the culture. I guess two things come to mind, and let's start with the culture. Adam, the Bruins roster from the point where we are right now is going to look probably different 48 hours from now. But what has to remain the same is the culture. And he was a big part of that, and he knows a lot about it. But the other thing that comes to mind, since we were talking about Matt Poitras before we had the interview with Andrew Ference, he's another great example. He made his NHL debut at 20, played 30 games for the Penguins. Back down he went. Then the next year at 21, he played 36 games for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Back down he went. And it took until he was 22 years old in 2001, 2002, before he stuck full time in the NHL. And that's a big way, and that's the path that a lot of guys take. And I think he's a good example that we can talk about.
Yeah, no question about that. And even Brad Marchand early in his career, right? Was sent down to Prague, right? I mean, that happens. These young players, sometimes need a little bit more seasoning and they need a little bit more time for development. And it doesn't mean that they're a bust by any means. It just means that, that's part of their path, right? And in Andrew Ference's case, you bring up a great point. Mason Lowry's another player, right? He kind of went back and forth a little bit last year, but now has remained with the Bruins. And you also talk about that position in particular, right? And how long it takes for a player to come in their own, and 6-7 years even to get to their prime.
Oh, absolutely. And defense is obviously something that's really hard to learn. And he talked about it the other day, just all the things that he's working on. And I know we talk about all the time. Well, how is he improving defensively? How is he doing in his own zone, playing without the puck? And as much as he's working on that, he admitted, he's like, listen, I still love working on the offensive side of the puck, and I still have a lot of growth there. One of the things he talked about is I'm so inclined to be a pass first guy because we've seen him dangle players, and his first instinct, he says, to pass. He said, maybe I got to be more inclined to shoot because there is so much that can happen off the shot. But the whole idea is that he's developing at both ends of the ice.
All right, so the trade deadline is approaching. It's a tough time of year across the National Hockey League in a lot of cases because you're saying goodbye to a number of familiar faces. It's tough for players, it's tough for the organization, it's tough for the fan base, and so there's going to be a lot of changes. And I do want to get to that one quote from a general manager that you always go back to when it comes to the game of hockey, and that is,
great game, lousy business.
there it is. Great game, lousy business. And so, again, we'll see how things play out on the Boston Bruins end with the trade deadline on Friday. We have a trade deadline special. It starts at 2:30 on Nesson. So we'll see. Bruins got a game tonight, though. They got some business to take care of. They're going to have to try and shift their focus to the Carolina Hurricanes. That's not going to be an easy one here in Raleigh. So Judd and Brick will be on the call. I'll be ringside. Great to be back on the road. Great to be a part of the team once again, Judd.
Oh, it's going to be awesome having you at the game tomorrow.
All right, buddy. Well, that'll wrap things up for another episode of the Hockey Hub podcast. We will see you next time.